They called themselves gentlemen, protectors of family, defenders of order, pillars of society, whose portraits still hang in gilded frames, gazing out with pride. But behind the walls of their plantations, white masters carried super nasty secrets. Secrets so disturbing, so filthy, so unspeakable, they would rather burn history itself than let black men and women discover the truth. Listen closely. Hear the faint laughter of a ballroom, crystal glasses clinking, the polished music of a piano drifting through the halls. Then listen deeper. The metallic clink of chains in darkness, the slam of a locked door, the muffled silence that follows. One world of refinement, another of torment, and between them, hidden chambers of cruelty. This isn't the polished version of slavery you were taught in school. This isn't the tidy narrative of labor and economics. This is the filthy truth they never wanted you to know. The dirty, disturbing realities buried in shadows. Stories that will break your heart, disgust your senses, and reveal the hidden truths of black history that polite society has refused to face. Because the masters didn't just own land. They didn't just own bodies. They controlled souls, manipulated dignity, and indulged in obsessions so nasty that even centuries later, people still flinch at the thought. And once you hear them, once the secrets are dragged from their filthy hiding places, you will never see those smiling portraits the same way again. The story begins in the late 1700s and stretches into the mid-1800s, at the height of slavery across America and the Caribbean. Vast plantations rose like kingdoms, white columns gleaming, verandas stretched wide, fields of cotton and sugar shimmering in the sun. Outwardly, these were the emblems of wealth, refinement, and civilization. Families posed in lace and velvet, writing letters about honor and morality, singing hymns about faith and obedience. But beneath the elegance lay rot. Behind the polished image was a theater of cruelty. For the very hands that poured wine, played piano, and led Sunday prayers also orchestrated suffering too filthy to confess. These men were praised as protectors of society, but the truth is they protected nothing but their own disturbing appetites. History painted them as gentlemen. But what if the men celebrated in history books were not noble patriarchs at all, but predators hiding lives of filthy lies, nasty truths, and unspeakable acts? What if every portrait, every mansion, every statue was just a mask for disturbing secrets that would have disgraced them if ever brought to light? Slavery was not just a system of labor, it was a system of total domination. Enslaved men, women, and children were stripped of humanity, bought and sold like livestock, cataloged in ledgers with the cold precision of property. They were denied the right to speak, to resist, even to dream freely. The masters held absolute power, a godlike authority that permitted cruelty with no consequence. Control was enforced by fear, the crack of a whip across a back, the iron collar locked tight, the public spectacle of punishment designed to crush both body and spirit. Chains rattled not only on wrists and ankles, but in the minds of those who dared imagine freedom. Death was always near, the threat of it enough to silence voices before they could even rise. And the masters clothed their cruelty in the language of righteousness. They twisted scripture, quoting verses as weapons to justify ownership of bodies. They bent the law to defend their power, embedding filth into the very fabric of society. They turned domination into morality, erasing truth beneath pages of lies. But the most disturbing parts of slavery were not the ones written in law or etched in ledgers. They were the filthy secrets that lived in shadows, whispered between walls, concealed in diaries, passed as rumors no one dared speak aloud. Because while slavery broke bodies in the fields, its nastiest truths were reserved for the dark corners of the house, where masters unleashed obsessions too unspeakable to record. Black women bore the heaviest chains, forced not only into backbreaking labor, but into bedrooms and secret chambers, coerced, manipulated, and violated under the so-called privilege of ownership. They carried children conceived through violence, children who bore the blood of masters but were denied acknowledgement, denied family, denied freedom. Some of these children were hidden, some were sold away like shameful evidence, their existence wiped from records to protect the master's reputation. Each one a living, breathing reminder of filthy truths that white families destroyed documents to conceal. And black men were not spared. In public, they were emasculated, beaten, degraded, reduced to nothing more than laboring bodies. Yet in private, many were fetishized, their strength turned into an obsession, their bodies treated as forbidden experiments. Some were forced into humiliating punishments designed less for discipline than for the disturbing pleasure of their masters. Others were coerced into roles that blurred the line between labor and forced intimacy, trapped in a world where saying no was impossible. Psychological games were everywhere. A master might promise protection or the possibility of freedom in exchange for unspeakable acts, only to deny it cruelly, laughing at the broken hope of the enslaved. Others manipulated affection, pretending kindness while using it as leverage to satisfy filthy desires. And in these games, the line between survival and destruction was razor thin. This was not about necessity, it was about obsession. It was about domination disguised as intimacy. It was about using human beings as objects to indulge disturbing fantasies. The nastiest secrets of slavery weren't accidents of history, they were rituals of control, deliberately hidden, carefully buried. And the more the masters tried to hide them, the nastier the secrets became. For the enslaved men and women trapped in this filthy system, the damage was not just physical, it was psychological, it was emotional, it was generational. Imagine living a life where your body was never your own, where every breath was watched, every movement controlled, every choice stolen, where the chains around your ankles were only the beginning, because the true prison was the silence forced upon you. Enslaved women bore trauma beyond words. They carried the weight of children conceived in violence, some forced to cradle infants they knew would be torn from their arms and sold as property. Others endured the agony of watching mixed-race children, children who looked like both the master and themselves, treated with cruelty or shipped away to hide the evidence of filthy lies. These mothers grieved in silence, their cries smothered by the walls of a system that did not care. And when grief turned to rage, that too was punished, beaten back into submission. For enslaved men, the torment was different, but just as disturbing. They were stripped of dignity, denied the role of protector, forbidden to safeguard their wives, their sisters, their children. They lived knowing that at any moment, a master or mistress could decide their fate, humiliate them publicly, exploit them privately, or destroy them completely. And still, the world would call them property, not people. Their very manhood became a weapon turned against them, fetishized by those who saw their strength not as humanity, but as a disturbing obsession. These victims carried double chains. Labor by day, silent servitude by night. Families shattered, dignity shredded, hope suffocated. And yet in the shadows, small acts of resistance flickered. A plate of fine china deliberately broken. A hymn sung in whispers late at night. A field worked slower than expected, just to reclaim a sliver of control. Secret prayers offered to a God who, they hoped, still heard them, despite the silence of the world. But trauma like this does not die when the body does. It passes through bloodlines, through whispers, through stories told in hushed tones at kitchen tables generations later. Black families carry these unspeakable truths in silence, because speaking them aloud meant reopening wounds the world still refused to see. The scars of slavery were not only carved into flesh, but etched into memory, into culture, into every descendant who still feels the weight of that history today. And yet, silence cannot last forever. The truth always leaks through the cracks. Slave narratives began to reveal pieces of the nastiest truths. Courageous men and women risked everything to tell their stories. Stories that abolitionists recorded, stories that whispered of mistresses' obsessions and masters' filthy lies. Their words were often dismissed as exaggerations, as propaganda, because polite society could not bear to accept what they revealed. But those testimonies were seeds, carrying disturbing truths across generations. Sometimes the secrets spilled through scandal. A letter discovered in a chest. A will that quietly mentioned illegitimate children. A court case where a white family fought to erase the existence of mixed-race heirs. These fragments of evidence slipped into the light, confirming what enslaved people had always known, that the master's honor was nothing more than a polished mask hiding filthy truths. But most secrets stayed buried. Masters destroyed diaries, burned records, tore pages from ledgers. Families rewrote histories to erase shame. And still, the truth lingered in blood. Because you cannot erase DNA, modern testing has revealed lineages that tell stories white masters never wanted remembered. Stories of hidden bloodlines, of descendants who carry both the legacy of the oppressed and the genes of their oppressors. Living proof of nasty secrets once buried in silence. And when these truths surfaced, society recoiled. Black communities felt both pain and validation. The whispers of ancestors, the stories passed in shame, were finally confirmed. But confirmation reopened old wounds. Every revelation was a reminder of suffering endured, of dignity stolen, of secrets forced into silence. White families reacted differently. Some denied the truths outright, insisting that their ancestors were noble, incapable of such disturbing acts. Others fell into silence, burying shame beneath layers of denial. A few confronted the past with honesty, but they were rare, because acknowledging the filth meant tearing down the very foundations of identity, family pride, and cultural myth. Historians faced backlash when they dared tell these stories. For too long, white masters were depicted as patriarchs, landowners, men of honor. To paint them as predators, as men obsessed with power, lust, and cruelty, was to shatter the myths of an entire culture. And culture resists. Films, textbooks, and classrooms sanitize the past, focusing on fields and chains, but rarely on the nastiest, most unspeakable secrets. Because to admit those truths is to admit that slavery was not only about economics, not only about labor. It was about obsession. It was about filth. It was about men who dressed as gentlemen, but acted as predators in shadows. And that is a truth history still struggles to face. Every portrait of a proud master hides the cries of those he destroyed. Every family heirloom passed through generations is stained with suffering. Every mansion standing today is built upon secrets so disturbing that their silence feels louder than any words. Why did they guard these filthy lies so fiercely? Because they knew the truth would destroy their legacies. They knew that if the world saw them as they truly were, the illusion of honor, refinement, and civility would collapse into dust.